Officer Harry Dunn delivered shocking and painful testimony about the vicious racism of the Trump mob who Donald Trump sent to attack the Capitol. The testimony came with no warning today as it was broadcast live, but we can now warn you that this testimony includes racist language attributed to the Trump mob.
I told them to just leave the Capitol, and in response they yelled, "No, man, this is our house. President Trump invited us here. We're here to stop the steal. Joe Biden is not the president. Nobody voted for Joe Biden." I'm a law enforcement officer, and I do my best to keep politics out of my job. But in this circumstance, I responded, "Well, I voted for Joe Biden. Does my vote not count? Am I nobody?" That prompted a torrent of racial epithets. One woman in a pink MAGA shirt yelled, "You hear that, guys? This nigger voted for Joe Biden." Then the crowd, perhaps around 20 people, joined in screaming, "Boo, fucking nigger." No one had ever called me a nigger while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer. In the days following the attempted insurrection, other black officers shared with me their own stories of racial abuse on January 6th. One officer told me he had never, and in his entire 40 years of life, been called a nigger to his face, and that streak ended on January 6th.
Joining us now, Claire McCaskill, former Democratic Senator from Missouri, and Eugene Robinson, an associate editor and Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for The Washington Post. Both are MSNBC political analysts. And Gene, the Officer Dunn wanted us to hear that language. He could have coded it. He could have kind of whited out the words in a way. And the committee wanted us to hear that specific language that was used. It is now in the congressional record. It is there. The decision's been made at different times during the day to bleep out some of those words, which I completely understand. But there is a unique power in those words that I personally think the committee was right to want Washington and the country to hear.
I think absolutely the committee was right, because that was the reality. That was real. They didn't treat Officer Dunn even the way they treated the other officers who they tried to kill. But he was not just the enemy. He was, and apologies to MSNBC listeners, but he was to them a nigger. That's what he was. It's not even a millimeter below the surface of this crowd, of this Trump cult cloud, the white supremacy, the racism, the anger, the rage at the fact that here was a powerful black man in a position of authority trying to defend the Capitol, and it went just in the snap of the fingers from he voted for the wrong guy to he is beneath us. He is it went straight from he voted for the wrong guy all the way back through 400 years of American history. It's just stunning piece of testimony, a stunning moment. It was shocking to, I hope, to everyone's core, but wasn't surprising. It was not surprising, and that's the experience that other black officers have described having that day. That's what this crowd was about.
And Claire, the confidence with which those people use that word, the ease, as Gene says, it just instantaneously came out of them. That's the way white racist America talked 50 years ago and 60 years ago. All over the place. It was all over my neighborhood in Boston. You heard that everywhere all the time with confidence, complete confidence. But that's disappeared in those neighborhoods. That confidence anyway, public confidence about using that word that way, those words, has disappeared in those formerly racist neighborhoods in Boston, some of which still retain a lot of racism, but they don't have the confidence to throw that word around that way at people like that, the way the Trump mob has that confidence.
There are so many ugly things that Donald Trump brought out in this country, but maybe we saw today the ugliest. And that is, as you say, Lawrence, it has become the norm in this country that if you are a pure racist, an ugly, ignorant racist, you typically don't shout it from the rooftops. You wait till you're in a quiet place with other like-minded people. But what Donald Trump did, he empowered these racists to be violent. And I think you and I have seen a lot of congressional hearings. I don't think we've ever seen one as emotionally raw, as compelling, as riveting, as this hearing was today. And I think the part that was most heartbreaking, you could say it was Adam Kinzinger losing his composure. You could say it was the strength of Liz Cheney. You certainly could say it was all of the police officers telling the facts of what happened that day. But that moment, when that black officer explained to America how he was treated, that should be the moment that all of these Republicans who are bowing at the knee of this jerk who was president for 4 years, that's when they should say, we're sorry. We are very, very sorry that we gave this guy the kind of power that he clearly took and abused.
Let's listen to more about what Harry Dunn said was the experience of black officers that day.
Everybody, even sitting at this table, fought a different battle that day, but it was all for the same war. And as black officers, I believe we fought a different battle also. And the fact that we had our race attacked and just because of the way we look, frankly, I guess it is America. It shouldn't be, but I guess that's the way that things are. But it's not the side of America that I like. It's not the side of that any of us here represent.
Gene Robinson, Donald Trump says they went there with love and they were hugging and kissing those police officers.
Yeah, big hug, big kiss. Amazing that it was Officer Dunn who, sitting in the rotunda, just trying to process the day later on that day, just trying to come to terms with it. Just said, is this America? And so that was the question that was put back to him, is this America? And that was his answer. I guess it is. I mean, we have to believe our eyes and ears. And again, yes, Donald Trump made it acceptable and possible, and made it possible for people to feel power in showing that sort of old-fashioned mean racism as overtly as you possibly could. But he didn't invent it. He didn't put that into all those people. It was there. He allowed it to come out. He gave it permission to come out in the ugliest possible way. But we keep saying we have so many unresolved issues about race to deal with in this country, and if anybody ever needed any evidence, look at the Confederate flags. Look, don't anybody try to tell me that we talk too much about race in this country. We talk not nearly enough about race in this country because, as I said, it's not even a millimeter beneath the surface.
Yeah, and Senator McCaskill, the old saying that a picture is worth a thousand words, those pictures of that crowd with their Confederate flags, each one of those pictures was worth 1,000 of those racial epithets that I, for one, am not surprised that that crowd was throwing around.
Yeah, and I think, frankly, Lawrence, the visuals that are now really on everyone's hard drive, the Confederate flags, the man hanging from the balcony in the Senate, the guy with no shirt and the animal horns on, and then the violence as they broke through the doors and smashed glass that has been touched by hundreds of people sent there by America to do their work. Those visuals are never going away. And anyone who believes this is going to get swept under the rug doesn't understand the power of visuals. And I think this testimony today just absolutely augmented the visuals we've all seen. But those visuals will continue to be the most powerful way America will remember what Donald Trump tried to do to America on that day.
Claire McCaskill, Eugene Robinson, we three...
Wait.
Go ahead.
I got to tell you something.
Go ahead.
I've got to congratulate you on your Emmy nomination, Lawrence. Congratulations, well-deserved. I know that just came out today, and I didn't want to get off TV tonight without telling you how proud I am to work at the same network that you work, and my most sincere congratulations on your nomination.
Okay, so credit correction, because this is what I look like when I'm learning about an Emmy nomination for the very first time. It turns out it was in this time slot, but it was for a special by Jonathan Capehart, and so well deserved. And so I will bask in Jonathan Capehart's reflected glow for earning that Emmy nomination in this very time slot. So,
well, you may be fact-checking me, Lawrence, but you still deserve an Emmy.
Well, I got one at home. Claire McCaskill,
There you go.
Claire McCaskill, Eugene Robinson, thank you both very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And coming up, the Justice Department is not going to shield former Trump officials from testifying about Donald Trump's actions leading up to the Trump mob attack. The Justice Department says that it will not shield former Trump administration officials from testifying to Congress about efforts by Donald Trump or other officials to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Jeffrey Rosen, who was acting Attorney General after William Barr stepped down, is among the officials being allowed to testify about reports that Donald Trump and then Chief of Staff Mark Meadows pressured him to investigate false claims of voter fraud. Another is Jeffrey Clark, then acting Assistant Attorney General of the Civil Division, who is accused of plotting to oust Rosen with Donald Trump's help to make it easier to challenge the results of the election. The Justice Department said, while it typically resists such congressional inquiries, this time it is making an exception, writing, quote, "The extraordinary events in this matter constitute exceptional circumstances warranting an accommodation to Congress in this case. Congress has articulated compelling legislative interests in the matters being investigated, namely the question whether former President Donald Trump sought to cause the department to use its law enforcement and litigation authorities to advance his personal political interests." The Justice Department adds that the White House agrees. President Biden has decided that it would not be appropriate to assert executive privilege. Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Dick Durbin tweeted today, "The committee has been pushing DOJ for this waiver for months. Now that we have it, we'll proceed to interview relevant witnesses ASAP so we can get to the bottom of this plot to enlist DOJ in Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election." And joining us now is Neil Katyal, former acting U.S. Solicitor General and an MSNBC legal contributor. Neil, interpret what this means for us.
Well, I think your viewers all recall that Donald Trump, while president, blocked a lot of testimony from executive branch officials using this doctrine called executive privilege. And executive privilege has a long pedigree. It's used for all sorts of reasons to provide secrecy around government decision-making, usually at the time, because you don't want basically courts or Congress meddling in the midst of like foreign affairs decisions or military decisions and the like. But executive privilege is always waivable. And what the Justice Department today has said with President Biden's support is that executive privilege shouldn't be used here. That, and you know, they make really the most common sense, obvious point, Lawrence, which is what we are talking about here is the president, the former president, weaponizing the Justice Department in order to advance his personal political interests. That's the language you just flashed on the screen a moment ago. And that's a pretty extraordinary accusation to make against a former president. But here the Justice Department is saying, look, that's a serious accusation, and we think the American public and Congress deserve to know the truth about what happened, and they should hear from Justice Department officials and former Justice Department officials in the Trump administration. Those folks should tell their story to the Congress about what happened.
But it seems like the language here is rather mild. They're saying advance his own personal political interests. It also could be described as election fraud. It could be described in criminal terms. It could turn into a criminal investigation, couldn't it?
Absolutely. And the Justice Department, of course, is not going to tip their hand on a letter like this and use criminal statute language now, because, you know, that's something that they will speak through an indictment if that becomes appropriate. But honestly, Lawrence, I actually read this language and thought, wow, this is the kind of strong language I've been hoping from the Justice Department now for, you know, almost a half year. I mean, a part that you didn't show shows that the, you know, accusations that Donald Trump conspired with the Justice Department official named Jeffrey Clark to possibly overthrow the election and the like. So there's a lot in there that is really, really serious. And so now those former officials will have to testify, and possibly under this opinion, Donald Trump himself may have to testify because he doesn't have executive privilege. He can try and claim it, claim he owns it, and so on, but the Supreme Court has said executive privilege is for the incumbent, not for past presidents.
But presumably Donald Trump will eat up some time in court if he is subpoenaed, and many of these other possible witnesses might also eat up some court time if they are subpoenaed.
Donald Trump will certainly try and eat up court time. That's all he knows what to do. I mean, he doesn't know how to tell the truth. And so he will invoke with every possible defense all of this stuff. My only point to you, Lawrence, is it's going nowhere. The Supreme Court precedent on this is very, very strongly against him now that the Attorney General and the White House has made this determination on executive privilege.
Another decision by the Justice Department on the lawsuit suing Mo Brooks, Congressman Mo Brooks, for inciting the Capitol insurrection. Explain that one to us.
Yeah, this is a big deal. So there's a law called the Westfall Act, and it says you can't sue federal employees if they're acting within the scope of their employment. And in this lawsuit, Representative Eric Swalwell, a frequent guest on your program and this channel, sued Representative Mo Brooks, saying, Brooks, you basically conspired to foment the January 6th insurrection. And get this, Lawrence, Brooks's defense was, no, what I did was in the scope of my employment as a member of Congress. And what the Justice Department today said is poppycock. Fomenting a coup turns out not to be in the job description of a member of Congress, and organizing an attack on your employer is not within the scope of employment. So what this means is that while Brooks can still try and argue this Westfall Act stuff, the Justice Department is coming against him, and he's likely to lose it. Now, Donald Trump is also a defendant in this lawsuit, and he's also invoked the Westfall Act. And the Justice Department today didn't say anything about that. I suspect they will in the days to come. There is some language in the opinion today, in the decision today, the brief that they filed, that suggests that they don't believe Donald Trump has any Westfall Act immunity, but that's going to be the subject of a separate filing later on. But these two decisions today are pro-rule of law decisions, Lawrence, that basically say Trump and his minions, the truth is going to come out. These folks will be held accountable.
Neil Katyal, thank you very much for explaining all of that for us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And coming up, everyone involved is sounding optimistic about the bipartisan infrastructure bill tonight. That's next. In today's historic House hearing, we heard things we have never heard before in the history of congressional hearings. We heard on live television, on this network, words that have never been said on this network before. Those words are going into print tonight in the New York Times, where those words have never appeared before. Those words are vivid descriptions of a president of the United States sending a mob to the Capitol to attack the Congress and the vice president and to violently overturn an election. Those words prove that the Trump mob attacking the Capitol was full of white supremacists and racists. Racists who revel in the use of racist epithets, as the testimony of Officer Harry Dunn proved conclusively, testimony we will be hearing later in this discussion. Today's hearing was the first in American congressional history to describe the political followers of a president who came to the Capitol to, according to their own words, murder people, murder elected officials, and murder the police officers who were trying to stop them. The Trump mob described to some of the officers how they were going to kill them. No testimony like this exists in the history of the congressional record. Those words, those exact words that we heard in testimony today will live forever in the congressional record and will be quoted by historians forever. From a purely technical evidentiary standpoint, the single most important words said today were said by the very first witness who revealed, beyond a shadow of a doubt, who was to blame for everything that happened at the Capitol on January 6th.
It was a prolonged and desperate struggle. The rioters attempted to breach the Capitol were shouting, "Trump, send us. Pick the right side. We want Trump."
Trump sent us. None of the Republicans who are boycotting service on this committee could have refuted that statement today. Trump sent us. That testimony will never be contradicted by anyone in this investigation or any other investigation of the January 6th events. Many of the criminals now charged with attacking the Capitol have already said in their own defense that Trump sent them to commit their crimes. And so the committee that is charged with investigating what happened on January 6th and who caused it to happen already has the smoking gun testimony against Donald Trump. Trump sent us. The Trump mob, who were sent there by the President of the United States, told Officer Michael Wolff how they wanted to kill him.
At one point, I came face to face with an attacker who repeatedly lunged for me and attempted to remove my firearm. I heard chanting from some in the crowd, "Get his gun," and kill him with his own gun.
Officer Wolff had a few words to say about the Republicans in the House and the Senate who tried to block this investigation.
I feel like I went to hell and back to protect them and the people in this room. But too many are now telling me that hell doesn't exist, or that hell actually wasn't that bad. The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful. My law enforcement career prepared me to cope with some of the aspects of this experience. Being an officer, you know your life is at risk whenever you walk out the door, even if you don't expect otherwise law-abiding citizens to take up arms against you. But nothing, truly nothing, has prepared me to address those elected members of our government who continue to deny the events of that day, and in doing so, betray their oath of office.
Officer Gunnell believed that the criminals Trump sent were going to kill him.
I too was being crushed by the rioters. I could feel myself losing oxygen and recall thinking to myself, this is how I'm going to die, defending this entrance.
It took hours for Officer Aquilino Gunnell to find the time to respond to all of the messages on his phone from family members wondering if he was still alive.
I arrived home at nearly 4 a.m. on January 7th. I had to push my wife away from me because she wanted to hug me. And I told her no, because of the other chemical that my uniform had on. Sorry. I couldn't sleep because the chemical reactivated after I took a shower, and my skin was burning. I finally fell asleep 2 hours later, completely physically and mentally exhausted. Yet by 8 o'clock a.m., I was already back, on my way back to the Capitol. And I continued to work for 15 consecutive days until after the inauguration.
Officer Gunnell added another evidentiary point in the case against Donald Trump.
It was his supporter that he sent them over to the Capitol that day. And he could have done a lot of things. One of them was to tell them to stop.
Donald Trump's first tweet to the attackers who he sent to the Capitol was to encourage them while they were trying to kill Officer Gunnell and Officer Fanone and Officer Daniel Hodges, who we have all seen many times in video, this video being crushed almost to death at one of the doors at the entrance of the Capitol. We have heard Officer Hodges' screams on that video, but today we heard him describe what happened to him in that doorway.
My arms were pinned and effectively useless, trapped against either the shield on my left or the door frame on my right. With my posture granting me no functional strength or freedom of movement, I was effectively defenseless and gradually sustaining injury from the increasing pressure of the mob. Directly in front of me, a man seized the opportunity of my vulnerability. He grabbed the front of my gas mask and used it to beat my head against the door. He switched to pulling it off my head, the straps stretching against my skull and straining my neck. He never uttered any words I recognized, but opted instead for guttural screams. I remember him foaming at the mouth.
Some members of the Trump mob tried to convert Officer Hodges to join them because he is white and they are white supremacists. Others told him how he would die